So welcome, Stephen Mason, to the J-Commerce Business Soundbite. Can I just ask you to take a few moments to talk about yourself, your business, who you work for, please?
Sure, absolutely. So as you said, my name's Stephen Mason. I'm a licensed insolvency practitioner. I work for a company called Inquesta, based in Radcliffe in Greater Manchester. So insolvency obviously is a topic that is in the news quite often. We are licensed practitioners. So what we do is when a company is in distress, often we are called in for advice to assist and provide the best options, and to provide not just advice, but we are licensed to go through the statutory procedures such as liquidation, administration, and those kind of things. So it's covered by the Insolvency Act. And when you read in the news that a company is going into liquidation or administration or anything like that, it's the likes of ourselves who are licensed to deal with those situations.
Okay, so what's your background for that? Is that accountancy, law, bit of both?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I started out actually, did a degree in history and politics, and then followed a natural path. I did what's called the law conversion course, which is basically the law degree in a year after, for people who've already got a degree. I decided it wasn't quite for me, the legal side of things. So having gone into a few different things, I went into banking for a little bit, business itself, really was looking for something that I found interesting. And about sort of 2006, 2007 insolvency, reading up on it, unfortunately, the nature of the world is companies will always be struggling in whatever climate. There'll always be some. So I decided that was something I was interested in, and I got a job with a local firm. Started at the bottom, and over the years, it requires quite a few examinations to pass those exams to become licensed practitioner. So I've been in the industry now for 14 years. So it's a mixture of experience. And I would say, yeah, I mean, someone who's come from an accountancy, a lot of the insolvency practitioners are either accountants by training who've then gone on to it, or some of them are lawyers. And some people like myself have kind of just taken the exams themselves, sort of freestanding, if you like. So yeah, I mean, it's open to anyone who maybe come from any background, but certainly, it is very regulated, and there's a lot of examinations to sort of to get a license.
So you said you work for a firm. Is it a big firm? Do you have people working for you? Is it just you who does, let's say, one project, so to speak?
We have about 15 people in the business. There are two partners. We have a corporate department, so there's corporate insolvency, corporate recovery, and then there's also personal insolvency. So obviously that's dealing with individuals themselves with financial issues, possibly bankruptcy, and what's called individual voluntary arrangements. So we have about 15 people. We are, working on some quite high profile cases where we are, as a company, we're sort of 9 years old, growing all the time. We do some, reasonably high profile work. And we are obviously looking to expand, and a lot of our work is around the country. The nature of the work is obviously remote working now in COVID anyway, so a lot of our work comes from all around the country. Some of it is more high profile than others, and obviously we are growing as a business.
Okay, so you mentioned COVID there. I assume you're a lot busier since all this began.
I mean, it is quite interesting because the statistics for insolvency themselves show, I mean, I think in February 2021, there was a 49% drop in insolvencies from February 2020, which was before the lockdown. Now, one of the reasons for that is a lot of the government measures that have been introduced, furloughing, grants, bounce back loans, business rates relief have actually, if you like, paused the situation for a lot of companies. So a lot of people, clearly a lot of companies are not trading at the moment, or certainly not trading, if you're in hospitality or things like that. So, the government measures are believed to be one of the main reasons why insolvencies are actually down, would you believe? But that could well be, I think it's fair to say that everyone admits that is a false picture. And as we enter out of lockdown, there will unfortunately be a lot of companies who will then have to face up to having increased liabilities and increased debts. And, at that point, I think we will see a lot more companies coming to us. I mean, we are picking up, I'd say, since the budget in the beginning of March. There are a lot of companies that are realizing that things are very difficult and approaching us for advice. But yeah, I think we're not quiet by any means, but the industry itself has been a lot quieter than people would expect. But I think there is an acknowledgement that come September, maybe when furloughing ends, and the government sort of, we've effectively seen state control of industry. So, we will see, I think, more activity in the insolvency world come September.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I guess all this furlough, whatever, is, I guess, plugging the gap for the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, what normally happens is a lot of, so prior to the lockdown, a lot of companies that were coming to me, the term is often said zombie companies, so companies that are really just existing, that really shouldn't be carrying a lot of debt. Well, all of a sudden, a lot of those companies, managed to get hold of grants and loans. And so, the kind of companies that should have, because it is almost like a natural thing that some companies do fail and have to fail because they owe other companies a lot of money. So, their existence is not a good thing for the economy. So those kind of companies, which you would normally need to go insolvent, because there obviously is a statutory requirement that if you are struggling to that extent, you have to seek advice. Those kind of companies have survived really when they shouldn't have. So once we get out of lockdown, a lot of companies will unfortunately have to admit where they're at and sort of need to take more advice. So yeah, the furloughing is one aspect, but loans that have been freely available, I won't say have been abused, but they've been very necessary for a lot of good companies. But unfortunately, there will always be companies who really, possibly have no future long term, and those kind of companies, will probably need to take action, when this lockdown ends.
Yeah, so would you say they've been responsible and maybe paid off debts that they've built up now that we've got all these loans?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting because I do get a lot of queries during these times, and there'll always be both. Unfortunately, there'll always be people who, I think what we're looking out for as insolvency practitioners is we've got a duty to obviously investigate what people have done with money. Now, there'll be a lot of companies that have used these loans, in a proper manner, but haven't been able to survive because simply the loss to their business has been so great. I think it's inevitable, and you read it in the news. There'll always be people who, have taken money where, they might have used it for personal gain, which is obviously was not the aim of the money, and that will come out in the wash, if you like. But it's very hard to say at this stage. I think knowing, being in this industry for so long, there will always be a small proportion of companies that possibly haven't behaved in the correct manner. So we'll have to wait and see. I think you read in the news now, a lot of the government, the HMRC, and a lot of even the police have been taking action against people who fraudulently claim the loans. So, I don't know to what extent. I know that those scenarios will unfortunately have taken place. But I'd like to think that the majority of people who took out the loans did so in a responsible manner, because it was an unprecedented and very, very difficult situation that we faced.
How important has professional advice been in guiding you? Because, like you say, you started off with a history degree, and then you moved into banking, and then you moved into insolvency. How have you taken on how have you taken on board professional advice to help you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I think it's always important to speak to people who are in the industry. In the industry, obviously there's work experience is one thing. When you do a work experience, and you almost have to find out what might be for you and might not be for you. I think dipping your toe in the water and trying is never a bad thing. Often people are, I don't think in this day and age necessarily everyone is going to be in one career for the whole life. So I think sometimes when you come out of university, or you come out of education, or you're looking to get into something, it won't always be the case that the first thing you do you realize is for you. I think you can read a lot, obviously, online, or speak. I think the best thing really is to speak to people in industries. And I think at the start, it's been a while now I've been in this industry, but I think I read up a lot on the industry, and I think I spoke to people who worked in it. But you can never quite, obviously, until you go into a job or go into a career. When I was working in banking, it didn't take me long to realize that, this is just not for me. Whatever you read up on something and whatever you speak to people, sometimes, until you get in there, obviously you want to make a good go of it, and you want to make sure that it's for you. So I think the best thing, professional advice, I would always recommend you speak to someone who's in that industry, and ask them, their experiences, pros and cons, because no career is perfect, and no career, there will be challenging aspects of every career, I think. But it's a case of finding what fits you, and your personality and your skill set. So professional advice, I think in terms of, careers advice, you can obviously go through that you can, obviously there's websites, there's the likes of yourself that are obviously giving advice. And I think speaking to people who work in a particular industry, and even taking unpaid work experience to find out about what an industry's like in normal non-COVID times. And I would always recommend researching as much as you can about an industry. But I think until you go into it, obviously it's very hard to know what it's actually like. Learning on the job is such a key thing, and through experience is everything, obviously, and it takes a while, obviously, to gain experience, and you pick things up over the years, and through the people you work with as well, and learning from them, and your managers and your bosses, obviously how they operate has been a very interesting learning experience, and very valuable.
So if you didn't enjoy insolvency, is there anything else you would have liked to have done? Was there a plan B or a plan C or D?
Yeah, I'm lucky. I've got a lot of interests. I've actually just released a book at the moment, which I wrote during lockdown, which is on Amazon. It's called The Adversity Formula. I may as well plug it. I enjoy writing. I've always enjoyed that side of things. So I think anything where I need to do any kind of written report writing, or writing in itself, I wouldn't suggest that I've always wanted to sort of be a journalist or anything like that, but certainly I enjoy writing and those skills, research, and academia. I was quite academic, so I think I think what you have to do is look at your skill set and see that those things are transferable to many different industries. What is it you're good at, and doing a degree in history might sound a very generic, sort of narrow thing, but obviously the skill set is analysis, research, writing, all those kind of things, which are very transferable to a number of other jobs. So I like to think that a person should look at their skill set, and those, and as I go on in my career, I've started to realize that relationship building, all these kind of very, very general skills are very important in a number of jobs, not just in one area. Obviously, if you're going to do a vocation such as engineering, or medical, situation, or even, you know, in insolvency or law, that you have to know your technical stuff. But in general, I think many transferable skills can be applied to a lot of jobs, as long as you find out, you know, what it is that your strengths are, and those can be applied to many different areas. I think it's a case of finding something that you find rewarding and interesting as the actual job. And I'm lucky that I do find it, you know, both of those things.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay. You mentioned relationship building. How important would you say it is to network, maybe in your career or just in general?
Oh, I think it's very important in this day and age as well. I mean, I'm a member of a networking group. I do a lot on LinkedIn and things like that. And I think, you know, a lot of our work is one-off work. So whereas in accountancy, you have regular clients that, you know, every year, our work is sort of one-off work. So, you know, my main aim is to connect and relationship build and network with other professionals, accountants, solicitors, because a lot of work will come from those individuals. For people will often go, when they're in trouble, will go to an accountant, or a solicitor will be involved in a dispute on behalf of a client, and often that is when they will call us in. Now, if I don't make those relationships, no one's going to know who I am, so they're never going to knock on my door or call me. So, you know, I think networking has been really fundamental part of my job. In terms of, you know, I could be the best person technically at my job, but if no one knew who I was, and no one, you know, I didn't go out there into the world and tell people what I did and how I could work with them, then the work wouldn't come in. So, you know, it's very much sales driven. Business is business. You know, people need clients, people need work in progress, they need work. So that will only ever come with, you know, networking, relationship building, unless you happen to have a very good network at the beginning. And, you know, I think no one ever wants to say, oh, I'm happy with my network, I know everyone, you know, I don't need to meet anyone else. You know, I'm always looking to meet new people. Obviously it'll be via Zoom at the minute, but, you know, I think it's so important because, you know, there are times when it can be very quiet, and, you know, you're thinking, well, where's the next job coming from? And so in that's a very good time period where you can be meeting other people and just introducing yourself, and, you know, just, you know, hopefully building a network. But it takes time, like anything else. You know, it's very much a long game, and a lot of things, it's about gaining people's trust, and it can take a long time to you know, get someone to sort of you know, you have to earn people's trust even in networking. They're not just going to give you work straight away. They want to trust the quality of your work and like you as a person. So yeah, I would say networking in, you know, many industries is absolutely crucial.
Okay, so going off the back of that, you mentioned that you obviously post a lot on LinkedIn. So how important do you think it is to have a website, social media, and how do you use that to, you know, broaden your network to try and get more business?
Yeah, good question. I think everyone, you know, at different I mean, you know, I've learned a lot about social media over the last year and a half, where I've really taken to using LinkedIn. And what I think, again, going back to relationship building, it's not about selling to people. It's about building relationships. So, you know, people can be quite put off when you start to sell to them. And I think we all make that mistake at the beginning. We think people will, you know, let's cut to the chase. They want to build relationships. And obviously nowadays, especially in the times of COVID, you know, a lot of your relationship building will actually be via Zoom or online. And I think I try and post on LinkedIn very, what I would call business related and sort of generic posts about that people find interesting. And then if I can get chatting to someone on the back of that, I think it's about making sure you're in someone's mind, so that if they want you for that, if they ever need you, and people will not need my services every day of the week, because it's, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm not a shop, I'm not selling anything that people need as a staple. So I need to make sure that I'm in people's mind should they need my services, so an accountant or a solicitor. So you've got to be careful. You don't want to overdo it with the posts. And some, maybe Facebook isn't something that I'm going to find particularly useful because, people don't generally seek an insolvency practitioner on Facebook. But on LinkedIn, I'm connected with a lot of accountants and solicitors and professionals. And so what I found is by posting and keeping in people's mind, by posting interesting content, and a lot of people do this as well, it's obviously not just myself, you might be the person that when they think, right, oh, I need someone in that industry, I might be, someone that they would consider, or that would come to their minds that they would possibly consider approaching me for some advice. So, it's a case of being in people's minds without overdoing it. And I think the social media, there is a place for it. And LinkedIn has been fantastic, but it's taken years of trying to understand what people want from LinkedIn. They generally don't want a cold call or selling. They want, some people don't want anything from it. They just connect and they're not interested. But those that do want something, just want a relationship and to know, they don't want to be sold to, is what I find. It's fascinating, really, to see how social media works for different businesses. A lot of accountants, Facebook groups are their source of work, or, so, but for me, Facebook, hasn't been it's been interesting, but not necessarily a source of work. So again, experimentation with different social media platforms, and, just being friendly and not being overly aggressive in sales, but really trying to, I think, help people as well. People appreciate when you're trying to help them with advice. And, I've been quite enlightened over lockdown as to how to use LinkedIn and seeing how other people use it. And, I think there's a place for it. And it's not the sole source of work, but it's a very interesting, medium, I think.
Yeah, at least it's free as well, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but would you say your industry is a necessary evil, so to speak? Because nobody obviously wants to have to go through insolvency.
I mean, I guess in the same way that you might say that a doctor or, a specialist is, I think we're more of a business doctor than people think. It's a vital part of, don't forget, a lot of these companies that might go insolvent owe a lot of other companies money. So those are the creditors, and their voice is very important that they're heard. And obviously, it's not just about burying the company in an undertaker sense, but that, there's a very real need for our services in an investigation sense. If creditors are obviously entitled to know what happened, and the government is obviously interested to know, whether someone is fit to carry on as a director. So, I would never use the word evil, obviously, but, there is a place for what we do. And, it's not all negative. We do a lot of work to recover assets on behalf of creditors and make distributions. We work with companies who are solvent, who've got reserves, who need to make a tax efficient liquidation. And unfortunately, I suppose like a doctor, we're only dealing with people that come to us that have got problems. And obviously, people need advice and they need to know what the law is, because obviously the law is very stringent on, the Companies Act and Insolvency Act. And, people have to behave in a manner once they have problems that is in accordance with the law. So, I think necessity is definitely, whether fortunately or unfortunately, we just like someone needs to go to a specialist, in a medical sense. Sometimes people need to look at their options, and we also give advice to people about whether, you're fine to carry on, what you're doing is perfectly acceptable. Or rather say, no, you cannot make this worse for the people you owe money to. You can't prefer one creditor over another. That's again, at a certain point in your insolvency, that is, it's not fair on the other creditors. So I think what we do is quite important in the chain of business.
Okay, so how do you handle like critics and negative comments? Because basically you might have somebody whose company spent 50 years building it up, and for one reason or another, maybe due to COVID, that's gone down the toilet, and then you've got all these creditors who are banging on your door wanting money. So how do you handle
Yeah.
the negativity in that side?
Well, I think you have to have a very thick skin, for one. You have to be very sensitive because you're obviously dealing with people who are, like you say, there could be a company that's been going for a long time. You have to have empathy. You have to have empathy for people who are owed money, creditors. You have to listen to people. And, there will be times where people are obviously upset. And, those kind of people are entitled to be upset if they're owed money. So I think, like any industry where there's a lot of contentious stuff going on, I think, you have to understand why people are often under pressure and they're not thinking necessarily straight, and they might say things that they don't necessarily wouldn't think if, in the normal light of day. So yeah, absolutely. I take on board that there are people that will be under a lot of pressure, have suffered a lot during the year. And I think it's a case of being sensitive to those people and listening to them and understanding that, people will say things about you and, you're not going to please everyone all the time. And there will be unhappy people who are owed money. And, one has to be sensitive and obviously not make light of that by any means. People are owed money, people are in distress, people don't know what they're going to do next because it's all they've known, that industry, and it's come to a grinding halt. You have to be very, very sensitive and deal with people, in a very, we do a lot of hand holding, I'd say. But I think generally, yeah, don't take it personally. People are upset. It's not necessarily you that they're upset with, it's the situation. And of course, I think it's easier because we're not involved directly, like it's not ourselves that owe them money. So I think it's often easier for me to take someone's upset or criticism because I know it's not directed at me personally, it's directed at the situation and trying to understand people, where they come from. And, I think I've learned that over the years that, you do, I've been to factories and we've had to, make redundant the whole staff. And that's not a nice thing to do. And understanding that people are angry and upset in those situations, and they're quite entitled to be. And we often help those kind of people with their redundancy claims so they can claim off the government. So being helpful, helping people, trying to show them that you're not the bad guy, you're trying to help them. That I think that's really important.
Yeah. Okay. So with the benefit of hindsight, is there anything that you do differently over the course of your career?
Well, not really, because I think that's the learning experience of life. You never know until it took me a few years to get where I wanted to be in terms of industry wise. I would never even have heard of insolvency at university, even coming out of there. Often, there are people that definitely know what they want to do and are really great. I'm really, impressed with those people. And, they've always wanted to be a doctor. They've always wanted to be an engineer. I think that's fantastic. There'll be other people who maybe are a bit unsure and they'll do a little bit of research and, maybe they'll go into a few things and it's maybe not for them, but hopefully it will be. I think, I don't think you can have any regrets because it's all part of life's learning experience. And, would you have had the same, I suppose I came quite late into it to some extent. I think I was 27 when I started in insolvency. So, there'll be people that would have passed the exams by that age, but, everyone has a different life experience. And I think maybe some of the things I did helped me understand, I worked in the industry for a bit, so I, understood business a bit. And I worked in a bank, so I understand how banks work. So yeah, things could have been different, I suppose, but I don't think you can afford to have any regrets. You have to take the experiences you've had and and learn from them.
Okay. Finally, is there any single piece of advice that you give to people who are watching this?
You know, I mean, if you are looking to get into a certain career, I think do your research, speak to people. Something can sound really good. You know, when I was working in banking, you know, all these traders that were earning fortunes, you know, trading futures and stocks and shares or whatever. But, you know, that might have sounded great. And I thought, oh, this is, you know, it sounds fantastic. But clearly my skill set, you know, I'm not that kind of mind, you know, it's not for me. I think you've got to be honest with yourself and say, right, I think what you need to do really is say, what are my skills, and work them out, and then find a career or a you know, a job, or even, you know, as I say, a lot of those skills are very transferable. If you've got analytical skills, if you're good with people, if you're a good negotiator, you know, a lot of these skills are very transferable. If you're good at sales, you know, I think that's fantastic. You know, it's such a great skill. I think everyone's got skills, you know, everyone's good at something. And I think it's about finding what it is within that skill set that is going to be the best career for you. And I don't think anyone should be afraid to experiment and put their hands up and say, you know what, I learned about that. I had some work experience, and you know what, that's just not for me. That's not who I am. Maybe I'm better suited to do something else. So absolutely, you know, it doesn't always have to be the first thing that you try. Hopefully it will be, and hopefully, you know, you'll get it right. But I think speaking to experts, people who've been in those careers, they'll tell you how it is, not how it is on a website necessarily, or a book. I think you've got to speak to people, and they'll tell you, you know, the good and the bad, because no industry is perfect and stress-free, and we just make, you know, everyone makes loads of money, and, you know, that's just not life, is it? So I think research and speak to people is the best advice I can give to people. And you know, hopefully that will pay off, in terms of you'll be armed with the knowledge that will hopefully allow you to make a decision. And then, of course, you know, trying to find that position that's available out there. Hopefully, coming out of lockdown, there will be a resurgence, and there will be a lot of positions, obviously, because people will want staff. And you know, I am optimistic long term for the economy, because people are always trading, you know.
Yeah, and I guess also, if you're in an industry, you start off in an industry, that first company you go to might not actually be decent, might not have treated you well, you might have had a really bad experience, but you can go to the next company, and it's a world of difference.
Exactly. I mean, I think you've got to experience it and see, you know, there's a lot of good companies out there, and a lot of good places, and hopefully that's who you find eventually, if not the first time. But yeah, of course, you know, you could like an industry and the company itself, you know, maybe wasn't for you, but you've got to experience these things and just try it, you know, dip your toe in the water, see, you know, you make a committed decision, obviously, and give it a go. And you know, if it's not, if you think the industry's for you, but maybe the company isn't for you, then obviously that you've got a decision to make at that point. But you know, lots of opportunities will be coming for people in the future, I hope. So yeah, I think you've just got to do your research, and you know, don't be afraid to make a decision, make it in a committed sense, but know that, you know, your skill set hopefully will apply to a lot of different areas, and that, you know, believe in yourself, obviously, believe that, you know, it can take a while, but you know, you have to have belief that you're, you know, you can do it, and your skills with over time, obviously with experience, that you'll be able to learn the job.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's all the questions. It's been some excellent advice. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Okay, no problem. Very happy to speak to you.